Back in 2011, if you wanted a cheap phone with touchscreen and Android, the truth is you didn't have many options beyond Samsung. Back then, Samsung had like a mania for flooding the market with cheap phones like there was no ending. Phones that were pretty much clones of each other with slight modifications. I can name numerous examples like the Galaxy Geo, Galaxy Mini, Galaxy Pocket, Galaxy Y, Galaxy Fame, and the phone we're covering today, the Galaxy Ace, which, despite everything, went on to sell millions of units given the favorable conditions of the time, back when people were making the transition from feature phones to smartphones with touchscreens. Because of that, this was the first experience many people had with an Android phone, and with the passing of the years, nostalgia took over and we remember this phone with some fondness. I remember that when I was in school back in 2011, I used to fight with two of my classmates over what platform was better, me with my Nokia 6120 and they with their Galaxy Ace. In some things, the veteran Nokia 6120 was superior, but when I saw that the Galaxy Ace could play 3D games like Asphalt 6, my jaw dropped to the floor. Sure, it was laggy AF, but you could see the potential there. From there, I made the effort to learn more about Android, since back then I thought Android was some kind of a Chinese operating system for touch phones, so it never really caught my eye until that point. The Galaxy Ace I have here is a special version. The flower decorations you see are not part of a screen protector, which at first I thought was the case, but no. This La Fleur version not only had those decorations but its own themes, boot animation, wallpapers, and ringtones. This version, from what I came to know, sold for the most part in Eastern Europe. Sadly, the previous owner flashed some other ROM and it lost all the quirky features it had. Many people didn't like this design, but I personally loved it, even more so with the floral decorations. On the front, we have the classic menu, home and back buttons, and the ear speaker next to the proximity sensor. On the left side, we have the volume down and up buttons, and a small hole for a lanyard. On the other side, we can find the memory card slot and the power button. On the back, we have the camera next to a flash, the speaker in a rather bad position, and the Samsung logo. Finally, at the top, we have the charging port, and at the bottom, another hole that allows us to remove the cover to access the 1350 mAh battery. The screen is only 3.5 inches, being of the same size as the iPhone 3GS, and when Apple saw this and other suspicious things Samsung implemented in their products, they filed a lawsuit against Samsung for violating their patents. Samsung lost, and in 2018 they were forced to pay $538 million to Apple in compensation. The quality of the screen in terms of viewing angles and colors is not bad for the time. I can see they threw more money here than on other devices of the time like the Galaxy Y, especially in terms of resolution where they doubled the number of pixels. In addition, it was not a magnet for annoying scratches since Samsung used Gorilla Glass instead of plastic, which was common on their phones. Unfortunately, this doesn't apply to its guts, since literally the Galaxy Ace, the Galaxy Y, and many other phones internally are the same device. Both have that very same Broadcom ARMv6 processor running at the same frequency, the same 290 MB of RAM, and the same meager 190 MB of storage. I must also mention that there was another version with a Qualcomm processor, which in CPU terms was a little better, but in GPU terms, it was the opposite. Originally released with Android 2.3.6, it received a whopping 0 software updates. It seems Samsung launched the phone and then completely forgot about its existence. Anyway, I decided not to use a custom ROM to make this video. Unlike the Galaxy Y, this phone didn't get as much love from the community as that device did. Most ROMs are from 10 years ago, and most links are broken. And the ROMs themselves are full of bugs and were really unstable. I did take the time to install a custom ROM just in case, but I wasn't convinced. You don't really gain that much functionality because, for one, you're limited by the old ARMv6 processor that doesn't let us use modern APKs. So if you still want to use this phone for some reason, the best ROM is the stock ROM. The first thing I did was install Opera Mini. This browser is a must if you want to browse the web. The stock browser can't do anything other than Google things, and other browsers like Firefox, despite being compatible with Android 2.3, they need the ARMv7 libraries to run. The same happened with the Opera browser, which didn't let me install APKs newer than 2013. Since this version of Opera Mini dates back to 2016, a lot of websites don't load correctly, but it is better than nothing since you can at least see something. Most news pages do load, but the images not so much. Wikipedia articles load perfectly, but then you have more demanding websites like the Apple page, which surprisingly does load, but the photos and everything are messed up. But then again, it's better than nothing. I tried using Instagram Lite, but the APK for Android 2.3 doesn't work anymore. All we get is this message telling us to upgrade. They do give us a link to download Instagram Lite, which is really nice on their part, but the APK is not compatible with this phone. The same goes for Twitter. I tried several browsers, but we get the same result. The page just doesn't load. Facebook, on the other hand, works really well using Opera Mini. We can see posts, like them, and even send messages and post things. A few weeks ago, I discovered a page called Idroni.com that allows you to watch YouTube videos on old Symbian devices. I thought it was gonna work here, but no matter what I did, it didn't work. There's an option to download videos, but the phone refused to play them for some reason, even when those videos were only 144p. The YouTube website itself doesn't work. All we get is a message asking us to upgrade to at least Android 4. But I wasn't going to give up that easily, so I did what they told me. I installed a custom ROM and took it to Android 4.4. But the page doesn't load anyway. It tries, but it only plays the audio. I gave Idroni a second chance, but the videos failed to play. And it's not the website's fault, because it does work on my old Nokia 520 running Windows Phone 8. We have a 5 megapixel camera, and yes, the photos are as bad as the number implies. The results are photos with little detail, dark and colorless. Even for the time, the photos are quite bad. If you have moving objects, take for granted that it's gonna be blurry. But honestly, I've seen worse shooters than this. That includes other Samsung phones like the Galaxy Y. In low light conditions, you can barely tell what you're taking pictures of. If there's any light, it's gonna be a mess. Videos are blurry. The 480p videos it takes are not very good, even with good lighting. This video was taken in the middle of the day, and you can clearly tell the blurriness. In low light conditions, surprisingly, it does hold up way better than I expected for some reason. Maybe the downgrade from pictures to videos is so big that when we make videos in low light, somehow that doesn't level up so much in low light videos. Moving over to gaming, we can play some old jams like Angry Birds, Temple Run, and Subway Surfers. To do this, you have to search for ARMv6 compatible APKs. Anyway, it's really nice to get to play these old jams on this phone. Another game from the time that is really fun is Resident Evil 4. The game surprisingly does run extremely well. When I tested this game on the Galaxy Y, it was a laggy mess, but here it's the opposite. Good optimization really does magic because both phones have the very same processor. If anything, it should run worse here because of the higher resolution. But if we really want to squeeze the most out of this phone, we can install Chainfire 3D and play some games like GTA 3 or Asphalt 6. But the files are really hard to get nowadays, and sadly I don't have them anymore. So the closest to getting the most out of this phone is playing Asphalt 6, which, like I said at the beginning, it does run with a ton of lag, but I guess it's too much for the old ARMv6 brain that is inside it. When it comes to emulation, I installed this NES emulator called SNES OID. Most ROMs are perfectly playable, and honestly it's kind of nice to play these games here. I really enjoyed the experience. Playing Donkey Kong Country, my favorite game for the console, is a joy. The game runs flawlessly, and because the screen is like a tiny square, the game looks great here. You could use the phone as a portable mini console and finish the game anywhere. But the real question is, does it run Doom? And the answer is yes-ish. The game is really laggy, and even with frame skipping set to max, the game is still gonna be unplayable. I think it's just the emulator because this phone is really capable of much more, as you're gonna see later. PlayStation 1 emulation is the big surprise. All the games I tested run very well, some better than others, but they do run. The emulator I'm using is the FPSE emulator because even old versions of the APS-XE emulator are not compatible with this phone. I'm playing Metal Slug and it runs great, 10 out of 10. Persona 2 also runs great. Speed hacks are not necessary to play it. It's really nice getting to play one of the latest games for the PS1 on this tiny screen. Somehow it feels natural to me. Resident Evil 3, my favorite Resident Evil game, runs really smooth, but to get this level of performance you need to set the speed to 35%, because otherwise it'll be laggy. Anyway, the game is perfectly playable, but the controls are really not great because to shoot, you need to use 3 fingers and that's not really comfortable to do, so a Bluetooth controller would come in handy.
Brad, hang in there. Why isn't someone doing something about this?
Now finally we get Crash Bandicoot 3. To play this game you need to set the speed hack to 45 to 50%. The game is somewhat laggy but still right on the limit of what I called playable. The game is one of the top games for the PS1 and seeing it run here is something I totally didn't expect. And seeing how it didn't play Doom but this far more complex game is kind of shocking to me. And to top it all off, we have N64 emulation. I was about to give up on it because after a long search, the emulators I got to test refused to install. Others did install but didn't open, others required files that were no longer available, and others just refused to play any games. That until I found this emulator called Mega N64. The emulator does work on this old bugger, but when I got to open the games, they run really bad. Mario 64, as you can see, is not playable, but the fact that the phone opens the game at all is a big surprise. Having tested and squeezed every last drop this phone had to offer, where does that leave us with the Galaxy Ace? The only use I can see for this old bugger, and the only 2 things it's still good for, is as a small music player since it still has a headphone jack, and as a retro console. The screen is decent enough for that and the battery lasts for a long time. I loaded a ton of music here and its compact size makes it ideal to carry around. You won't even notice you have it with you. Anyway, having said that, I hope you liked this video and I'll see you guys the next time. Bye.